Hi everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Love Languages Building Better Relationships. I'm super excited to welcome back Brenda Cleaver from WSU Wellbeing Online tonight to talk about these different love languages and how they apply in our personal lives to help build better, more meaningful relationships. We'd like you to realize and notice that there is a chat box. We'd love this to be a conversational event tonight, so please feel free to type in any comments or any questions or anything you may feel like you need to say, and we'd be glad to help answer them and talk through them. So without any further ado, here's Brenda.
Hi everybody. Welcome to the conversation space tonight. My name is Brenda and I'm a graduate student here at the WSU campus, and my major is counseling. And through my education I've learned a lot, and I found that Gary Chapman's way of talking about the different ways that we communicate love and affection was quite powerful for me. And I'm excited to share this information with you. If you've heard about it and maybe read the book or done some online research, maybe this can be a little bit more for you coming into this holiday season, which can often be a time for reflection on our most important relationships. So before we get started, did Priscilla or JD, either of you, did you get a chance to take the love languages quiz? And looking at the chat box down here on the side. So if you want to say yes really quick or no, we can talk about those things. Priscilla did, and JD says that he has as well. JD, okay. Anyways, so when we think about our love languages, and we've taken the quiz before, almost a year ago. Okay, so it's been a while. We'll talk about Gary Chapman's research a little bit later on, but he is kind of along the lines of things that says our love languages remain pretty consistent. That the way that we give and receive affection might change via circumstance. Say if you were in a long-distance relationship, you might not be able to communicate your love in the same way that you would if the person was sitting in the room with you. And so when you think about our love languages and the way that we communicate our love, think about the top two that you might have. Priscilla and JD, do you remember what your top two were? Quality time and physical touch. Okay. Thank you, Priscilla. JD's remembering. Physical touch and words of affirmation. Okay, so physical touch and words of affirmation are my top two. Great, and Josh is affirmation and gifts. All right, so we kind of covered all of those except for acts of service, which I'm sure are part of our relationships. In the video that we did, the promotional video for this, I asked the question of when do you feel most loved? Gary Chapman frames this in the way of what is it that we request from others most often. When I come home from work after a long day, I come to my partner and I say, give me a hug, because physical touch is my first one. Do either of you have a different experience with this? JD's girlfriend is exactly the opposite of him. Sometimes I push him away. All right. And that happens sometimes when we speak different languages. And I guess that's kind of what we have. You also have the different Myers-Briggs personalities. Okay, that's good to know too. It sounds like you do quite a bit of research into your relationship and you're quite invested. Sometimes we find this contention when we both come into a relationship with different needs and different ways of communicating our needs. And so a great way to kind of circumvent or be aware of this tension would be to do some research about the ways that you might be coming into this, and then kind of forming a hypothesis about how your partner, loved one, parent, child, coworker could be coming at this from a different slant of attachment or needs for affection. And then the last kind of point I want to make is not only how do you request and how you give, but how do you tend to show it to other people as well. Even though I speak that I request physical touch, oftentimes I show acts of service instead. And so that's kind of something to think about in the way that maybe your partner does have a different love language, but maybe they're showing you in a different one. And Gary Chapman talks about the idea of dialects, that we all kind of come into this with a different orientation or blend. I really love this graphic. If you've ever been exposed to a Venn diagram before, the parts where they overlap are where things are connected. And I love the idea that all of these are working together to form this connection experience. I strongly believe that no one operates with just one thing in mind. If you take the quiz, it'll kind of show you that maybe you have an 80% fit with words of affirmation and like a 10% fit with gifts. Gifts might not be your primary, but for sure, I'm sure there are some times in your life when a gift was very meaningful to you. Gifts in our American culture sometimes look like wedding or engagement rings. Those things often mean a lot to people, but they're not what we would typically consider a gift. So just thinking about that as we move through this, that not everything has to be one answer, that you have to find something that's in between the two of you. I'm going to read the chat box real quick. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if you all can read this, but JD is asking that the survey says how you receive love and how you give most love. Acts of service, I feel I show a lot. Yes, and I think that there is something that we learn from our partners and that we learn simultaneously throughout our relationships. There's this idea of reinforcement that happens. When we do something and it's reinforced in a way that we find pleasurable, we're often going to repeat that behavior. Now, the reinforcement can be intrinsic. It can be a happy thought like, oh, I did something meaningful. This mattered to my partner. I made them feel special. Or it could be something external from your partner. It could be hugs and kisses. It could be words of affirmation like praise for whatever it is that you did. And so sometimes the way that we speak love becomes reinforced for different reasons. So being aware of yourself is really the biggest piece here, JD, is that notice, take stock of how you interact with your partner in your world. And I love that it is that you see that acts of service tends to be up there, along with physical touch. So be mindful of that, notice if those things change and how they impact your relationship. So here on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see I have my notes here to kind of remind me to stay on track. Your time is important, and we have approximately like 30 to 45 minutes together. So when we talk about love, a lot of people think that we talk about attachment, and there's something really special here. That many of us, when we think of attachment, we think of a mother figure or father figure with a small infant child. And this could be seen across species. And there have been lots of studies done that show that when children are securely attached to parents, they explore the world more appropriately, that there's reduced fear and anxiety within that relationship. The things that we learn about our attachment with our parents or caregivers or significant others, they tend to translate across our relationships. These patterns of interaction, they kind of recreate themselves all the time. You may have noticed this with maybe a friend or even yourself. You get a new significant other, you start this relationship, things are great for months, you're kind of in this dopamine, oxytocin high, things are great, and all of a sudden, pretty soon you're fighting about the same things that you thought about with your previous partner. Now this could be something that you're learning, this could be something that your partner is learning, this could be a number of things. But often it comes down to the idea that our needs aren't getting filled and that we don't know how to ask for those things appropriately, and the people we're asking to fill them don't know how to fill them appropriately because we're seeing through these different lenses of our experiences and attachment experiences. So attachment is really important here. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, but there tends to be 3 different styles of attachment. This moving towards, this pleasing person, this moving away person who maybe becomes a little bit closed off or resistant when you get too close. And then there's a person who just shuts down and who maybe isn't available at all, or they have kind of this fear reaction. And thinking about yourself, maybe when things become vulnerable or hard or there are discussions, think about the way that you might interact with those and kind of take stock of that as well. Earlier I kind of touched on the idea that there are stages of love. We have bodies that are, they produce information for us. Our brainstem and our spine actually provide more information to our brains than our brains give to our bodies, just in the amount of sensory input that we have. And the cool thing about love and attachment is that we can see markers flare up in your neurobiology that say this person lit up like a Christmas tree when they were exposed to stimuli of their significant other. And that's because there are things happening in your biology that say that this is great. I'm really attached to this person. I really like this person. They're pretty cool. And then that kind of fades over time as this attachment then changes. We might think of examples of maybe our grandparents or an uncle or an aunt who've had a relationship that's lasted years beyond what you might have experience with. And they might tell you that their experience of love has changed over time. And that's important because our relationships should be flexible enough to allow growth. And if they're not, sometimes that can be really stifling. And that kind of leads me into the next conversation point of values, growth, and flexibility. As we grow as human beings, we're often inspired by our environments. We're impacted by our environments and the people around us. And sometimes that means that we go through stages of re-examination. Thinking about the term that people kind of throw around of a midlife crisis. That sometimes relationships are really damaged or strengthened by the idea that one of the partners, or maybe even both of the partners, are re-examining their values. And that's directly translated into how people connect and relate to one another. Thinking of an example, my grandfather was a vet student here at WSU. And during his time at WSU, he was very devoted to his academic career. My grandmother was very young, and so they kind of made this dynamic where my grandfather was gone a lot of the time. And now that my grandfather is retired, he's home much more. And so this value examination has happened, and it's created some tension in their relationship. But healthy tension. You know, they're growing and they're moving with this, and they're trying to figure it out. And anytime that you learn more about yourself or you learn more about your relationship, there is this kind of growth period that happens that can be uncomfortable for both you and your partner. So be aware of that as you move through this information today. Because the goal of this webinar, from my standpoint, is to increase your connection with other people. And when you increase your connection, that means that there's more of you, more space of you to be touched and to touch other people. And if you're not used to that, it can be quite uncomfortable. So let's go ahead and shift the conversation to our 5 areas that are pretty important here. Earlier we talked about that we had everyone here was present except for an acts of service person. Hi Victoria, thank you, and JG for joining us. To start off the conversation about words of affirmation, there are a couple of common identifiers. These are people who tend to speak or really flourish when you give them compliments or encouragement. They might be people who say things like, wow, thank you so much for, and then fill in the blank. And it could be something that they thought of all weekend long and they've been waiting to tell you. These could be people who write you little notes. Lots of people signify their words of affirmation differently. It could be a child who comes to you with a grade report and says, look what I did. And they're kind of waiting on edge for you to say, wow, nice job, to kind of seek that praise. So one way to speak to these people or to give them love, if you feel as though that might be something that they're looking for from you, is to do specific praise. There's some research to show that people tend to prefer more specific praise because then it gives them an idea of what might be profitable or useful in the future. Again, returning to that place of reinforcement. There's been quite a bit of science that shows that that rewards work a lot better than punishments. And so if you have this very specific praise of, let me think of something. My significant other's name is Charlie. Charlie, thank you so much for doing the dishes. I really appreciate the way that you heard me when I said I was drowning and overwhelmed with my schoolwork. You showed up for me and you did something that I really appreciate. That's a really great example of specific praise. And this can easily be turned into sharp criticism. If I'm requesting love in this way and I'm not doing it very mindfully, I could say something like, you don't care about me. you never show up for me. You don't do things around the house that would equal our burden or help me in this way. And then it might turn into nagging. And that might be difficult for you and your partner to navigate because the way that we ask things really impacts the way that we receive the things that we ask for. Things to keep in mind, tone and nonverbal cues. There are lots of ways that we say things. Our rate of speech, our tone, our inflection, hand gestures like what I use, they say a lot. And if we're not genuine in our compliments or our words of affirmation here, those things really come through. Humans are quite intelligent in the fact that we have learned to read each other's faces and emotions to kind of look for this affirmation or this connection. And I'm sure some of you may have experienced an ingenuine comment before and have been able to notice that. How's everyone doing with the information so far? Any questions? No questions? Not yet? I'm good. Okay, good to know. If anything comes up as we're talking, please feel free. I'm going to really try hard to see in here. You guys are saying hi to one another. I like it. So next on our list is quality time. We have someone here who said quality time was one of theirs, right? I can scroll through this chat and see here. Words of affirmation. Priscilla was quality time. Priscilla, when you think about how you like to receive quality time, what is it that tells you that your significant other or someone important in your life is giving you what you need in terms of quality time? Put you on the spot. If you're uncomfortable, let me know. So Priscilla says that she recently experienced a loss and her significant other surprised her with a visit to make sure that she was okay. And he presented himself in your world to kind of show you that you were important to him, which is awesome. Kudos. That's a pretty big deal to go through, and I'm sorry for that. I think that there is something great here that your significant other saw that showing up for you is important. And I'm not sure if you requested that or not, but that's really insightful. And something about quality time that's really important is that sometimes we don't feel as though we can ask for someone's time. And that can be a difficult barrier to overcome, especially if you might have this automatic thought that maybe someone's too busy or maybe they have something else that they would rather be doing. It can be pretty difficult to ask for that type of quality time. It can also be difficult if that quality time isn't made in a way that feels comfortable or great to you. And this means time without interruptions. Do any of you remember the challenge probably about a year ago where people were set to look at each other in the eye for 3 minutes of time? Do any of you remember that? It was by this person who said that they can make anyone fall in love. And it's a pretty interesting dialogue. If you haven't heard about it, do a quick Google search and see what you can find. It's really interesting what happens, though, in the space of 3 minutes. Two individuals, they look at each other in the eye, and they're not allowed to talk or touch or anything, but there's this overwhelming sense of intimacy that becomes developed between these two people. If this is something you want to try on Valentine's or any other time with a partner or someone that you care about, I encourage you to try it. It can be an interesting experience and experiment if you've never tried something like that before. So that would be 3 minutes. Might not seem like a lot, but in that moment it can feel like forever. And part of that is because we're not relying on our other languages to convey what we're feeling in that time. This experience of vulnerability. And the time without interruptions is really, really important. Typically, during quality time, we talk. We share our deeper selves with one another. And when people interrupt, or maybe they spend time looking at social media on their phone or answering texts or emails, that doesn't create that sense of intimacy that many of us are looking for in that time. So if you notice that your significant other really respond well when you give them enough quality time. Keep that in mind, because it doesn't have to be a lot. Even 3 minutes of just giving your undivided present whole self to someone else can do a lot. Something to avoid is extended time apart. This can't be avoided sometimes. And this is where the idea that we have a primary love language and then we have all these other ones that we can rely on to let someone know that we're special and important to them and that they are to us too. So keep that in mind. Get creative. If you have some upcoming time apart, maybe reward that time apart with something very special, like a date night or a special dinner with just the two of you, something that you can think of, maybe even a walk. Some things to keep in mind during this time is your active listening skills, the idea that you listen without interruption, you give your whole attention, you provide reflections that show your understanding. I don't know if any of you have had the experience of saying something like, my day was really hard today, and someone kind of looks at you and says, can I make you a sandwich? That's not really what I was going for, but yes, I would love a sandwich. The idea that there's something different there that I wasn't really heard. Maybe they did hear me, but they did not show me that they heard me. And so thinking about that and the idea, again, of being vulnerable, that sometimes we're going to get it wrong, and sometimes we're really going to mess up. And there has to be some grace there, that you might even mention something like, wow, I really messed that up. You don't want a sandwich for me. You had a hard day. Tell me about it. It has a different impact, but it is impactful when you kind of have some sense of humility and that this person really cares about you, that they're thinking about the way that you might interpret that. Thoughts? This is super strange not to hear your voices. I feel like I'm talking a lot. I don't see anybody chatting, so I'm going to move on to acts of service. And JD earlier mentioned, JD says sounds good, earlier that he tends to give in acts of service, and as do I. And this might mean that we come home and we ask that the dishes be done, or I came home with a shelf that needed to be refinished, but I had no interest in doing it myself. I kind of bought this project for my significant other. And when I came home and it was a surprise that it was done, it was quite special to me. And so this might be something that you might recognize in your significant other or even in yourself, that maybe you buy these projects or you come into something with this idea of crafting, but you want to share it with someone, or you even want to do it for someone else without them knowing. Something to think about with these guys, the actions to take tasks together or to make it special together. Even to just do something as simple as washing the dishes or putting away your shoes, if that's not something that's regularly important to you, but your partner has made a request, try to hear what that is. This doesn't mean that if your partner is an acts of service person that you give them lots to do, because that can be not a friendly and fun thing to experience. But thinking about how instead the things that they're doing are important to them as they are to you as well. Something to kind of avoid is putting off these requests. If someone says to you, it's really important to me that this happens, and you think, why? That's not important. The dishes aren't going anywhere, or we have to go get the mail anyways. Why would we make an extra stop? Take a beat and ask, how come is this important to you? On a level of 1 to 10, how important is it compared to other tasks that might have been given to you or you were voluntold about earlier that day? Because when they put off these repeated requests of affection or attention, it can damper our approach. If any of you have ever had an opportunity where you have asked multiple times for things like a hug, and the person that you're asking for a hug from maybe isn't a hugger, and you know that, and so maybe your requests kind of taper, but they still reinforce you every once in a while. They do give you that hug, and you know that it's important that they give you that hug. That's something to think about. Being honest about your ability and capabilities to take on a project, and we can do this in the workplace. Sometimes people say, yes, yes, give me more, and then there's this life happens moment where maybe that wasn't at the top of your priority list, and the person who was depending on you kind of feels sad that maybe that they weren't important to you. And so to think realistically about what resources you have to offer, especially in the area of your love life, it can be a lot of work to show up for someone like that. And so thinking about how much resources you have in ways that you might respond to your partner that are fulfilling for your partner and for yourself. So think about that in your acts of service, because it looks a little bit different for everybody. Do you have any thoughts or questions? Nope. Everyone is so on it. I like it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Victoria's going to smile at you. I like that. Can smile at you in person these days. So the next topic is gift giving, and common identifiers might be people who birthdays or holidays are really important for. These are the people who might be planning and really excited to plan these gifts. Or they might just be people who are very prepared to give gifts. And gifts don't have to be extravagant things. So many times in the video that we recorded for this event, people said, oh, I don't want anything huge. I just want someone to say something nice. Or it doesn't have to be a dozen roses, but maybe that you thought of me throughout the day. And that's kind of what gift giving really symbolizes, is a visual, physical token that they were thinking of you throughout the day. I'm glad you liked it, Victoria. It was a lot of fun to do. Small gifts and spoken appreciation often go together. The idea that if you're not a card giver, that maybe a written card might be even more than what you would typically do. And so that could be a gift, but it could also be words of affirmation. So thinking about those things. If there's someone who special days are really important, like an anniversary or Valentine's Day, the work of remembering those things can be difficult, especially if they're not on the top of your priority list, if the two of you come from different orientations here. So ways to jog your memory, to ask which days are most important to you. And as they become upset, kind of navigating that, I am wanting to know this so that way I can meet your needs better later on. Putting yourself little reminders on your cell phone. I don't know about you all, but my calendar on my phone is everything I live and breathe by. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to orient myself to the day. And without those reminders that it was someone's birthday or that I need to pick up a card or something, I might not do that because it's not my first act. So that's on the things to avoid. And then things to consider. In our culture, sometimes we tend to, gifts have a connotation. There's something about power that happens here, and that sometimes when we give gifts, there's this obligation of receiving a gift comfortably, because sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes we don't want the gifts that are given to us, and sometimes it's not comfortable to give gifts either. We don't really know the person. We don't know much about what they might want or need. And the idea of buying affection can be quite distasteful to most people. So when you're giving gifts or receiving gifts, think about how this should be a meaningful event for you, much like our conversation about acts of service and our words of affirmation, that this should very much so be intentional. It shouldn't just be something that you saw on a whim that you thought could work for anybody. Well, that is the case sometimes. Sometimes those acts can kind of miss our genuine opportunity for connection. And then the idea of gifts for an individual versus gifts for a family. Sometimes we lose track of that, and so if you have a question about, well, what do I get this person, maybe I should get them something for the family overall, have a chat about that and make sure that you're being intentional with that. Last up is physical touch. This is my primary. Like I said, I really like hugs. And some common identifiers for this might be someone who pats you on the shoulder, who really responds well to that. Maybe a gift for this person might be a massage. But again, when we talk about touch, there's also power here, that some people may not feel comfortable with touch if they don't know you well. Or the opposite is true, that they might be more comfortable receiving touch from a stranger than they would from someone who's close to them. The place where we receive touch is our bodies. And our bodies, they give us a lot of information, and they also hold a lot of things for our thoughts and feelings. And sometimes we put meaning on our bodies behind them that is important, that other people can't read because it's an internal dialogue or it's an internal feeling or thought. And so when we touch people, we need to be cognizant that there might be an internal reaction that we don't see. So some of the actions to put into this, if you are a physical touch person, to request the type of touch that is satisfying to you, and then to try to give touch in a way that's comfortable for your partner. If holding hands does it for you, request that you hold hands. If you're not comfortable with public displays of affection, don't do something that isn't true to you and who you are. Something to avoid with this is, just like with any of the others, if you know that something is important for your partner, to withhold that affection, connection, whatever it might be, whether it's physical touch or words of affirmation, to withhold those things it can be a powerful motivator, but it can also be a powerful detriment to the relationship as well. So when you might find yourself withholding touch, it's often related to the sense of safety. That when we withhold this sense of affection, oftentimes we're not feeling safe or connected. That we kind of close ranks and try to protect ourselves. And so when this is happening, when you find yourself hearing things like, "You haven't hugged me yet today," take a beat and reflect why that might be, and then I invite you to move into that and have a genuine dialogue about, "I'm exhausted and I don't think that I'm comfortable yet for a touch," or "I just finished a workout and I'm really smelly, please don't touch me," that type of thing. And so just kind of acknowledging that your own internal experience is quite valid and it needs to be appropriate and there to be able to inform your partner or anyone else that you're interacting with. And then the idea of enthusiasm. It's so hard to say things like that without being rude. I agree, it is. And I would invite you, Priscilla, to think of what you would like to model for your types of interactions. This has been a struggle for me as well, just to share a bit with you that sometimes it's hard for me to kind of have these boundaries, to talk about boundaries here, to request that my needs be met as well as requesting another's. And in the idea of a partnership, it should be this give and take dynamic that should be happening. And when one person is giving without receiving appropriately, thinking of giving a touch or giving a hug even when they don't feel like it, there's this sense of it not being genuine, and that there's something missed here. And we can learn from that. And so when we phrase our comments, we can use I statements, and that really helps take away some of the blame or the shaming experience that people can have when they request or give love in a way that they're enthusiastic about and the other individual isn't. So if you say things maybe like, "I see that you want a hug right now, but I am feeling too vulnerable or too raw to give that to you in this moment. Can we return to this later?" The person might be taken aback. They might have some time to think about that, and it might be quite uncomfortable. But my encouragement for you, Priscilla, would be to kind of move toward this with a genuine and open heart and see what comes back to you. Because I would be surprised if your significant other hasn't experienced the same thing themselves and might be a bit relieved that finally the unspoken thing is spoken and that they might have an idea of what's happening. Does that make sense? We've been together for so long that he's just so used to it now. And that's true. And that's, well, I don't know that that's true. But I have experienced that in my own relationship, the idea that we get in these patterns of interaction that we kind of just expect things from the people around us. That we expect that our needs will be met and that this will happen without a problem or without contention. And you're right, to be able to say something like that, like I don't want a hug right now or I don't want to be touched, that changes things. And it changes the cycle that you've created with your partner. And when we change things, there's often resistance from that. Like, I don't know what's happening here. Help me understand. Or there might even be this lashing out experience of, why are you changing? Or there could be this very pleasing experience of, oh, okay, you're changing, let me change with you. And thinking about how your partner might react to this, the best way to invite them to change is to tell them that the change is happening. And this could happen even before you interact with this hug piece. It could be, introducing the thought that sometimes I don't really feel like hugging. And it could be said in casual conversation beforehand or not. It all just depends on what type of orientation tends to work with your partner. But trying new things can be hard and scary. And sometimes they just don't work. And so I'm excited to hear what your journey might be, because what works for some people might not work for others. Helpful? I hope so. We talked about enthusiasm and withholding touch. Do any of you other folks have any questions about physical touch? Nope. Okay. Review. Okay, so this is something that I've said over and over, that the languages are not mutually exclusive. But the idea that they should be used in harmony and to not use something that doesn't feel right with you. And this takes a journey of reflection and understanding yourself and being kind with yourself throughout this process. If you're noticing that your partner needs something that you don't feel comfortable giving, maybe give to yourself the kindness that you would give to them if they were trying something new for the first time. This is also a great place to talk about SMART goals. If you're looking to change your behavior in some way or implement something new, there's something on the Wellbeing Online website right now that talks about SMART goals, and the science shows that we do best if we focus on one goal at a time and we kind of devote these small steps towards creating this bigger change. So if you have this big change of creating a more vulnerable and intimate relationship with your partner, maybe break that down into 3 or 4 tasks that might be according to their love language that you might implement throughout the week. There's a really neat love challenge that's up on the 5 Love Languages website that will be showcased a little bit later on. But the idea that you could maybe move towards some of this to start that action process. But while you're doing that, there's this process of discovery and exploration that there's no need to be perfect in this space. That the idea of perfection is often quite limiting, at least in my experience. Sometimes I don't even try things because I am afraid that I might not be good enough at them, that my efforts would be rewarded, I guess. And so when you think about trying new things, again, coming back to that kindness piece, that there should be some flexibility here as you're building insight, because every new layer of insight is going to expand your view just a little bit further. And then the intentionality of your efforts. If you're walking into this thinking, oh, I'll just do a couple of things and we'll see how it goes, I invite you to be intentional with this, because creating change, especially within our important relationships, is no light topic. Because when you create change, you're not only changing the way you interact, but the way that they're receiving you as well. And that's a pretty responsible thing. So being mindful of that, being intentional with that. So if you haven't already, or it's been a really long time, visit the 5 Love Languages website and take the assessment again. After this conversation, your results might be different. And then if you're like, nope, Brenda, I'm not going to take the time to go do that, then I invite you to reflect on what you appreciate about your partner and what you appreciate about your relationship, and evaluating if this is something that you desire to change, or if there's some sort of movement that you would like to see here. Asking yourself what is good and how do I move towards that, and what is bad and how do I move away from that. Oftentimes we stick with the what is bad, but we found that if you focus on what is good and adding behaviors that you want, the behaviors that you don't want, they tend to kind of fall away. And then thinking about what you ask for. Sometimes I ask for things that I don't really ask for. That maybe my nonverbal say, give me a hug, but my words say, I'm actually quite angry with you. And this type of mixed approach of asking things can make it difficult for people to kind of give what it is that you're asking for. So when you ask for physical touch, being clear about what kind of touch it is that you want. When you ask for acts of service to be done, being very clear about that, so that way the person that you're engaging with knows the rules, so they can show up and play the game with you, and you can kind of play together here. And then asking yourself what is most annoying to you. If I'm a words of affirmation person and my partner isn't, and I spend all day seeking these compliments, that could be quite annoying to him. But I keep asking because it's a need I have that hasn't been filled. And so thinking about the things that are annoying to you, or the things that your partner might be kind of broaching on demanding or nagging you about, listening to those and kind of trying to understand what might be at the bottom of that. And some ways to discover that would be to ask your partner, what are you asking for? Because I'm not sure. I'm confused. Those types of statements will help. But again, remember your tone and your inflection and your rate of speech, because those all say things too. And then identifying your purpose, we talked about that. And then rewards work better than punishments. Thinking about a time in your life when you've been rewarded for things or when you've avoided punishment. Really great example of this might be speeding. Many of us do not obey the speed limits, or we tend to push them a bit, but when we see an authority figure like a cop, or even a police sign, or one of those flashing signs for schools, that's kind of a visual reminder that we're kind of breaking the rules. And so we might slow down, or we might keep going with what we're doing. But punishment tends towards aversion, where rewards tend towards seeking behaviors, that it's something that is going to keep happening. So I hope that that's clear. Sometimes that can be hard to distinguish. And we might accidentally reward behavior that we're trying to diminish. So there's that too. So it can be kind of tricky, so pay attention to what you're doing and what's happening for you. JD said that makes sense. I'm glad. I don't know that I articulated that very well. And then this is the test here. If you haven't taken the test before, this is the link to go to the test. If you type in the Google search, you should be able to find it right away. There is a test for singles, there's a test for children, there's a test for partners. Gary Chapman has done a really great job of providing lots of resources for folks. If it's not a good fit, this can just be a great tool to understand the way that you might interact with your world. There are lots of different typologies out there. If Gary Chapman doesn't work for you, there could probably be someone else. Oh, great, Josh uploaded the link. Awesome, thank you, Josh. And then here's the Love Languages Challenge. When I signed up, it will tell you what types of things that you can do to speak your partner's love language. And this is based on a guess, if you don't know. Or you can invite your partner, your friend, your significant other to come take the test as well, and then you can kind of talk about it there. It might be a great start for a dialogue. Most people are pretty invested and curious about their relationships, their partners, and themselves. And so I encourage you to go back and kind of report back to your partner and see what comes up, because it might be pretty exciting. All right, so this is the part where I say thank you for joining me in this space, and ask you if you have any wrap-up questions. And then after we're done chatting here for a few seconds, Josh will take over and remind you about a survey. Do any of you have any thoughts about this discussion that you're like, oh, I have this idea that has been bothering me for some time, or Brenda, something didn't make sense here? Oh, okay. So JD's question is about how we recognize when our partner is giving love. People tend to repeat behaviors, and we may not recognize it because we don't receive love in that sense. Yes, you're absolutely right. Sometimes we don't see it. And so I guess, JD, to answer your question is to think about your partner and what they repeatedly do for you that is important to them, or things that they comment that they say, wow, I thought you would have a much different reaction to this. Does that make sense? So it might be having a question and answer type of section. So saying something like, darling, I noticed that you always make me a cup of coffee in the morning. And I really appreciate that you make a cup of coffee for me in the morning, but I never finish it. So I'm wondering if the cup of coffee is your way of telling me that you think about me first thing in the morning. And kind of having that conversation, because the person might notice that you're not drinking all your coffee and that maybe what they're doing isn't being appreciated. So having that conversation saying, I'm noticing this, what do you think? Because often they'll have an answer that might be different than what you had hypothesized it might be. Is that helpful? Does not have that in his opposite level. Okay, well that's pretty difficult. And being an introvert, that means that our interaction styles are much different. It might take more work to draw that person out. They might have to feel very safe in that area. So I would encourage you to maybe look up some active listening skills and really practice those with that person before you invite a more vulnerable conversation. Yes, we absolutely do misinterpret things all the time. All the time. And that's the problem with language, is that it means something different to the person who's speaking it than it is to the person who's receiving it. And that's why this concept of checking in, of asking, is really important to clarify things. Because if we operate on this idea that an assumption is correct, we can really get into trouble there. So rock on, that was a super great question. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Victoria, I saw that you were typing earlier. Did you still have a thought or comment? That's okay. The great thing about this format is that it will be available to you later, and I think that's a really great, that's really great. A lot of our interruptions that happen in this space are interruptions that might happen in our relationships too. And so thinking about how any interruptions we might have encountered today might impact how we might integrate this information and how we might move forward. So thank you. No need to apologize. These things, they happen all the time. All right, folks, I'm going to turn it over to Josh. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you and all your comments. So I'm going to turn off my video feed and I'm going to turn it over to Josh. Thanks, Priscilla.
Hey, everyone. I would like to offer Brenda a huge thank you again for taking the time to come and talk with us about the different love languages and how they apply in our lives and in our relationships and communicating for more meaningful relationships. I sure hope you guys got as much out of it as I did. My head is overflowing with great things right now, but I'm excited to use what I learned in everyday life. I just copied and pasted in the chat box a link to our survey. If you all could take just a few short minutes to fill out your thoughts about tonight's webinar, it helps us plan future programming. So yeah, please take a few minutes and click on that and fill out what you thought. I will notify you all when this video is live in our video vault, ready to be watched wherever you are. So Victoria, once it's up in the video vault, you can go back and watch what you missed. I'd like to thank you all again and have a good evening.